who are being affected by the shutdown, and to beg Congress to really reconsider this acts of political chaos, which are resulting in 800,000 people to go over a month without pay.
The government shutdown has been going on. So for 33 minutes. After that is over, we will say a few chants, and when our fine officers tell us that the event needs to stop and we need to stop chanting, we will stop and we will peacefully disperse. So again, thank you all for being with us. You will hear a chime for every minute, again representing every day that 800,000 federal workers and contractors have not been paid. So if I could get my chimers ready. Where's Mitch? No, again, please no chanting until this is done. And then there will be an opportunity for that. You have flyers that have some chants that we're going to say. Again, we will make the announcement once the silent protest is over. So, we will begin on my mark. In 3, 2, 1.
So we're at the Hart Atrium in the Capitol building, where hundreds of people are gathered in silence, organized by the Center for Popular Democracy, to stage a silent vigil and protest for the extent to which this government has highly mismanaged the president's actions around this wall. People are standing in silence to beg that the government be reopened and the 800,000 people who are currently going without a paycheck be paid, be brought back to work. And all the services, the National Park Services, NASA, TSA, everything be brought back to life.
All right.
We have members of Congress participating in this moment of silence. Right in front of our camera is Congressman Jamie Raskin and any other number of people who have come to D.C. specifically to speak to Mitch McConnell, Senator Mitch McConnell, who has refused to cooperate with either side of the government and really examine solutions forward. The president is continuing to demand $6 billion to build his wall, even though people on both sides of the aisle have said no. This is an ineffective way to deal with national security. It's unnecessary, and the government needs to get back to work. So we've spoken a lot about the ways that people losing their jobs and going without pay have affected them individually, but a lot of government programs will also expire if the shutdown continues. SNAP benefits will be hit very hard. People who receive Section 8 housing may lose their housing. People are already in danger of eviction who are not able to pay their rent. And perhaps unsurprisingly, a lot of private landlords are not showing sympathy for the situation that almost 800,000 workers in America are facing. One of the many tragic takeaways from what's been happening for the past month is the fact that a lot of people have viewed government employment as a sense of security. That's been sort of the mainstream of American culture, that working for the public sector was a way to not only serve your country, but have a sense of economic security. And a lot of people have reported turning away more lucrative positions because they valued the stability of government employment. And we're now entering a time in American political history where the opposite is true. This is the fourth shutdown of federal workers over the past year and a half, an unprecedented number of government shutdowns, never before seen. And this is the longest one in American history. The president, in a typical display of tone deafness, has suggested that people take second jobs over this furlough period, but the reality is that a lot of people are trying, and restaurants, temporary workspaces do not want people who may return to their stable employment at any moment. So this is putting people in a very awkward position of they don't want to leave their full-time jobs. These are their careers. A lot of the people being furloughed have worked in their positions for decades, but they also can't find temporary work. So to people just joining us now, we are in the atrium of the Hart Office Building in the middle of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. We have hundreds of people here to silently hold the space and ask the president and Congress to reopen the government. Congressman Jamie Raskin, Congressman Ro Khanna, many other people are here with us today to say this is absurd. We have 800,000 people who are out of work, and this doesn't even count the number of people who rely on the income from government contracts, who peripherally are affected, who have a husband or parent who work for the government and are being directly affected by this loss of income, or the fact that people are not being able to work in necessary public services, TSA, national parks, NASA. The list goes on and on and on. Before this, our longest government shutdown was in 1995, 21 days. We are now at a month. The average government worker is losing $5,000 from the shutdown so far. And most families of any income bracket can't afford that amount of money lost. And this isn't counting the security and emotional damages done to not being able to pay your bills, not being able to pay your rent, and the stress that families are going under as a unit when one primary income bringer cannot provide for an unending amount of time. Once again, we are in the Hart Atrium, participating in an action of silence and solidarity, asking the President and Congress to reopen the government. We have multiple Democratic members of Congress here with us today. People are holding up paper plates that say, "Stop the shutdown, feed our feds." The federal workers are hungry. So again, we are in the middle of the Hart Atrium in the Capitol, holding a silent space, asking the government to reopen. The government has now been shut down for over a month, once again, the longest shutdown in history. And according to recent public opinion polls, most people do blame correctly the Republicans. Mitch McConnell is refusing to consider any meaningful compromise, despite the fact that the House has passed a bill to reopen the shutdown, reopen the government without any funding for Trump's $5.6 billion wall. This shutdown has hit certain parts of the government harder than others. Among the $800,000 furloughed or going without pay are 41,000 law enforcement officials, 52,000 IRS workers, and 96% of NASA employees. The sad irony of the shutdown is that a lot of the areas and counties affected went overwhelmingly for Trump. A county in Kentucky, which was 99.6%, went for the president, also is the hardest hit in terms of SNAP benefits and other subsidies that people no longer have access to because of the shutdown. One of ways that the damage has already been done, aside from the damage to people's financial security and lives, are the ways in which this shutdown has hit government research operations. NASA in particular, but any other number of scientifically relevant census investigations, crime investigations, government data collecting has stopped, which might affect conclusions that we'll be making for the years to come.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So for those of you who are just joining us, we are in DC in the middle of the Hart Atrium with hundreds of people silently protesting the government shutdown, calling on the president and the Senate to reopen the government. Every week this shutdown costs, right now you're looking at Right now, you're looking from the second floor where you can see hundreds of people have gathered in the Hart Atrium in the middle of the Capitol. Every week, this shutdown costs the U.S. economy $1 billion. So far, in the month of January, which again, the government has been shut down the entire month of January, this has cost federal workers $400 million in mortgage payments. People are holding up plates that say, "Feed our feds, federal workers need to eat." Aside from people who are directly employed by the government, there are so many families affected and 1.2 million federal contractors who are working for less pay because of what's happening in Washington.
We have to win. It's going to take some more pains.
So once again, you are watching protesters in the middle of the Hart Atrium at the Capitol protesting the longest government shutdown in American history. The fact that the president is able to shut down the government over funding squabbles is emblematic of a deeper federal dysfunction that we face uniquely in America. The way we pass budgets with a supermajority and executive approval creates so many hoops and barriers that the president essentially does have the ability to do this in ways that is unique to America and is costing us our standing in the global economy and the ways we're perceived as a country. Every week, the shutdown costs our economy $1 billion. And so far in January alone, it has cost $400 million to federal workers and their ability to pay for their homes. Predictably, not every part of America has been affected to the same extent. The hardest hit area is Washington, with its concentration of federal workers, but New Mexico is second. Park workers, law enforcement, border control, ironically, are some of the parts of the government which were seeing the highest number of furloughed or let go workers. We have, with protesters, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman Schakowsky, Congressman Ro Khanna, Congressman Jamie Raskin, and other members of Congress. The Democrats in Congress were able to pass successfully a budget without funding for the wall.
That 33 minutes and the plates in your hand represent the 800,000 federal workers and contractors who have been forced to go to food banks, who've been forced to take other jobs to feed their family while they work for us. So again, we are going to chant once.
Protesters are about to start chanting
we will stop
and breaking their silent vigil.
But let's start this chanting with no more food banks. They need paychecks. No more food banks. They need paychecks. No more food banks. They need paychecks. No more food banks. They need Thank you all for being here. If you are participating in some of our additional actions, we are going to be meeting in the back. Everyone else, thank you again so much for being here. If the media would like to still interview impacted federal employees, please stick around there amongst the crowd. Thank you all. All right.
So that Bernie Sanders' resolution can go through at the same time. So my sense is the first week of February, and then we'll get it both in the House and Senate. The first time in the history of the country that the war powers have passed. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
We're just waiting every day for
You've been such a huge voice in so much of this ending the military interventionism. So I'm hopeful the conversation is changing.
Sure is, but they don't like it.
Yeah, Congressman, can I ask you?
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you as a federal employee in California. Thank you. Well, my family's from San Fernando Valley. I grew up in the valley.
Thank you for being out here.
Thank you for being here and standing with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for being out here.
Congressman, do you believe that there is any hope for opening the government with the legislations that are proposed on the floor?
Well, we've passed the 8 times legislation to open government. We need to open government, and then we can debate everything else. But you've heard the people here. They want to get paid for the work they're doing. It's common sense. Every other president has done this. They've kept government open. They don't hijack government for their own agenda. And all we're saying is open government, and then we can negotiate everything else.
Do you believe that this blocks any legislations regarding the foreign policy, for instance? You've spoken about Syria, you've spoken about Yemen.
Well, we're working on that. I want to end the war in Yemen. We're working with Bernie Sanders. We're going to have the war powers resolution go through in both the House and the Senate. But all of the shutdown impedes that work, and that's why we are the world's most influential democracy. We need to get government open. It's a signal of dysfunction to the world. Thank you.
Hi,
Good to see you.
So, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Can you please tell our viewers ways they can support federal workers, get involved, help?
Well, I'm so proud of folks here who are at the Hart Senate office protesting that they aren't being paid for the work they're doing. And we need citizens around this country speaking out with 3 simple words: open the government. That's what this is about. This is about getting the functioning of government open, and then we can debate everything else.
Seriously, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there any circumstance under which you would negotiate for border wall funding?
I would not support border wall funding.
Democratic forces around the world to stand with the people of America against the dictators and the kleptocrats and the autocrats who are now in league with each other, making war on democracy.
Congressman, I've heard some people suggest that in other countries, federal workers would have been out on strike by now, marching in the streets.
Yes.
Is it surprising that we have federal workers who are just willing to keep doing their jobs as best they can and willing to take this in silence?
It's remarkable that we have a federal workforce that is so committed to their jobs and to the people of America that they're willing to face down Donald Trump and the White House in these consistent, unrelenting assaults on the federal workforce. They don't want to go on strike. They want to be able to do their jobs, which is what they've been saying from the beginning. Because this is not some sort of episodic, extraordinary thing that we're witnessing here. He has been waging war on the federal workforce from day one of his administration. And the people here have had enough, and we're not going to take it anymore. So we're going to reopen the government, and we're turning things around in Congress now. We got a majority in the House of Representatives which is going to stand with the federal workers.
But if the TSA workers went out now in mass,
yes,
wouldn't this be over the next day?
Well, you're starting to see some very difficult situations breaking out among the TSA workers in the airports around the country. But unlike the president, we have federal workers who are loyal to the people of America, and they know what it means to shut down people's travel plans and make it impossible to get where they're going. But if this goes on any longer, all bets are off. Who knows what the federal workers are going to do? That's why we are here to beseech the U.S. Senate, and I'm here as a member of the House of Representatives coming over to the Senate side to say, please, do your job. Put the legislation on the floor. Let's legislate and let's reopen the government. We've got to stop a situation where the president is holding the government, the federal workforce, and the people of America hostage over a policy dispute. This is the longest government shutdown in American history. It's the most serious government shutdown in American history, and this president is at war with the people who are servants of the American people.
Mr. Raskin, how do you respond to people who now look at this and say we have such distrust in our government officials that the basic function of this government is not working the way it should be, and they look at leaders of Congress like you and they say all of them aren't doing enough? How do you respond to those Americans?
Well, I think that point is true. The president and his party are trying to ruin the public's trust in the government and in political leadership, and all we can do is come out and try to stand for democracy, stand for the Constitution, stand for the rule of law, stand for the separation of powers, stand for the way that Congress is supposed to work. So, I'm calling on all of our colleagues in the Senate side to do their job. We're about to vote this afternoon to reopen the government. Again, I think it's the 9th or the 10th time that we voted to reopen the government, to fund the government, and to get things moving again in the country. We are also voting to fund border security. We put $1.5 billion into it. The president's actions are exposing us. The president's actions are making us vulnerable at the border. They're making us vulnerable in terms of our food supply. They're making us vulnerable in terms of our international isolation. So we're trying to stand up for America here. The federal workforce is here because they want to do their jobs. And so we tell the president, whatever you contemplate your job is, tweeting and watching TV, go back and do it, but reopen the government of the United States.
Is a DACA for a wall trade-off fair? A DACA protection for Dreamers permanently for $5.7 billion. Would you take that deal for the president?
There's one thing that's fair here. Reopen the government of the United States right now. Yes. And then we will do our job in terms of legislation.
We want to work.
But the people here refuse to be held hostage. This is a hostage crisis right now, where the president is holding the workforce, the government, and the people of the country hostage. It's a very scary situation, given his admiration for autocrats and dictators all over the world. It's a very scary situation.
Isn't the House bill
30 seconds left. I'm like, finish strong, people.
exactly what the president asked for originally?
Absolutely.
Decided to go with
Every bill that we're passing now has been passed on a bipartisan basis, overwhelmingly by the Republicans in the Senate, in committee, or on the floor. So all we're doing is saying, take yes for an answer. We're going to reopen the government of the United States, and we are never going to allow a president to hold the people hostage like this again.
Thank you.
His own budget for 19 didn't have $5.7 billion for wall.
Well, that's a great point. You know, the president of the United States did not shut down the government when the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate, and he did not push the wall. So he didn't use the wall as leverage to shut down the government when the Republicans were in power. Then we get 10 million more votes than they do in the 2018 election. We pick up 40 House seats, and he decides he wants to shut the government down. He wants to hold the whole country hostage. So it's a scandalous situation, and we're calling on, can we find a dozen Republican senators who will stand up for the Constitution and the separation of powers? That's what we're here. Well, they're bringing a couple of bills out now, and they're starting to feel the heat. And we simply need the country to stand with the 800,000 federal workers and the hundreds of thousands of other small business people and private contractors who've been completely dislocated and humiliated by what the president did.
And you know what? They've been trying to separate the government from the people of the United States, and this is...
Well, you know what? It's not working. Every public opinion poll shows the vast majority of the American people stand with the workforce. The vast majority of the American people want the government to be reopened now and are very suspicious about what the president's doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie.
So that was Congressman.
Thank you, Jamie. Keep it up.
Kindly talking to us about the fact that, again, Congress has now made multiple attempts to end this shutdown. Hi. So as you can see, the silent aspect of the protest is dispersed, but people are still here. It sounds like Congress is going to vote again on an attempt to reopen the government. Like the congressman just said, this isn't so much as a negotiating tactic as a hostage situation. We're going to come talk to some more people.
Particular health needs there and particular lack of interest.
Dr. America.
Hi. How are you?
Hi, I'm good.
We've actually met before, but now there's a camera there.
Yeah,
so.
do you mind if I take this?
Yeah, of course. So we're here with Dr. America. He's gonna tell us how to save America, aren't you?
Yeah, so there are major public health consequences to the shutdown. And, you know, the big ones that come to mind are our food safety. The FDA has already suspended inspections of our meat. They've, suspended tons of processed food inspections. You've got hunger. We have so many federal workers going to food banks because they simply can't afford to feed their families right now. And for my patients and families, when they go to supermarkets and other stores with their EBT cards, if those retailers don't get license renewals to help them process SNAP and WIC payments, my patients and families are going to go hungry, not because there's no food in the stores, but because the stores can't take their payment. And so we've got a ton of hungry families. We've got our own food safety to worry about. There are tons of veterans who work for the federal government whose mental illnesses are going to be exacerbated by all this financial stress. So the public health consequences of the shutdown are huge. And what we need Senator Mitch McConnell to do is to simply, reintroduce the legislation that was already agreed upon last month and reopen the government. If they want to talk about having a wall, then hold hearings, not hostages. And let's have some real discussions about whether or not we need a racist border wall.
Well, I like that you're talking about the public health implications because it is a holistic system, right? The government, the country, it's an ecosystem. It's not as simple as 800,000 people out of work or this number of people who can't get their benefits. So what would you tell the people about how to get involved and how to fix this?
I would say that if you have not contacted your senators and members of Congress, dial 202-224-3121 and get on the phone with your members of Congress's offices. Let them know that this is a serious priority, that you're not going to eat tainted food just because the FDA was not getting paid or not getting sent to do food inspections, that you're not about to put your kids at risk for eating things that, we just went through a major food scare last month with romaine lettuce, and the thing that's worse than having tainted romaine lettuce is not knowing whether your food is tainted or not. And so it's actually important to get that message across to your members of Congress and let them know that a border wall and holding DACA families hostage is not the answer to this.
Thank you for bringing that up because I think there are a lot of people who may think that because they don't work for the federal government or they aren't directly affected. No, the food supply affects all of us. Ironically, border security affects all of us.
Right. And the thing about all of these things affecting us is that we don't have to settle for these half measures of a racist border wall that doesn't do anything for our security. We don't need the half measure of telling DACA recipients that we're only going to offer temporary assistance. We can do better than that. So we already have the legislation that we need to reopen government. We should get that rolling, and we should have some honest discussions about how we want to do better immigration reform.
I really appreciate you saying that. Is there anything else? And do you want to introduce yourself for real?
Sure.
Dr. America, but
Sure. My name is Dr. Sanjeev Sriram. I'm a pediatrician here in Washington, D.C. And I want to thank everybody for paying attention to the shutdown. Please don't dismiss this. Please get on the phone, 202-224-3121, and let your members of Congress know it's time to reopen the government and send people back to work.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So again, for those of you just joining us, we are in the atrium of the Hart office building in the Capitol in Washington, D.C., where hundreds of people have gathered in silent protest to say, hey, this is unacceptable. Do not hold our government hostage. I would like to speak to some of these beautiful ladies, if that's okay, or one beautiful lady. I'm told to ask how the shutdown affects you by your sticker.
Well, it's affecting me and my whole family, especially my kids. That's on asthma medicine that I probably would not be able to afford if the shutdown does not end because they will be out at the end of February.
I'm really sorry to hear that. So
D.C., born and raised.
Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Yvette Hicks.
Thank you for being here, Yvette. What can people do? What can people do to support you right now?
Right now, all they could do is help shut down this government and give us our job back. That's all we want. We ain't asking for a handout. We're just asking to come back to work. That's all we need is everybody to stick together and get this government to shut down.
Yeah, that's kind of how I ended up.
And again, I'm really sorry this is happening. I mean, it is absurd that you as a working person can't pay for your kids' medications right now.
Right.
Do you think people watching, like, how this is affecting everyone in Washington? Washington is one of the hardest hit economies by this nonsense. So you're saying just call Congress?
Yes. Right now, I've been breaking down day by day, and it's really hard for me just to see my kids, to see me frustrated and upset, and they don't understand what's going on. And I'm just trying to understand how can the senator and no one is voting to stop this shutdown. When I say it's affecting a lot of people, it's affecting people that actually have to live on food stamps, that have to have housing assistance, and you're taking away from people that need these things that's about to go back to simply being homeless. I have no way of knowing how I'm going to pay my rent, my car note. I'm checking out my window every day to see is my car gone. And just to be standing here and asking for help to support my federal workers, my government workers, and for people that's low income housing. We need to stand up and we need to fight. We need everybody where we need voices to be heard.
Thank you for sharing. I really know it's difficult, and I know it's probably not easy to talk about either, but thank you so much for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. So, again, you...
I can tell you that NASA engineers, service, private people undoubtedly we work at NASA. All of this, like a lot of us in the country. Right.
100%. Well, we voted I can't talk. I can't mess around, but I'll talk to you. Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I don't know I'm ready. So, what's up?
Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here today.
Do you want to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. You want me looking at you or him?
Okay, sorry.
I am J. David Coxon, President of the American Federation of Government Employees. That's J. David COX AFGE.
And thank you so much again for being here. What can you tell our viewers about what's going on right now.
Well, number one, we're in day 33 of the Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell lockout, shutdown of the federal government, in which over 800,000 federal and D.C. government workers are being put out of their jobs, are required to work without pay, and hundreds of thousands of government contract workers are being put out of their jobs for no reason. Imagine being required to go to work every day, now a month, and on payday you're not getting paid, but you have your bills and responsibilities. That's what Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell are doing to these employees.
It's horrifying. And what are our next steps as people on the ground? How can we help and support?
Number one, we've got to have more actions like we have seen today. This was 33 moments of silence for all of the days. Imagine that if you're a single mom trying to feed children and your take-home pay is averaging $500 a week and that paycheck's not coming in, how are you going to feed those children? How can a billionaire that lives in the White House and a very, very wealthy man like Leader McConnell deny these people who are working hard for the federal government, screening us at airports, keeping us safe, air traffic controllers, inspecting our food, correctional officers in the prisons? All of those people are paying a price, along with their communities and others. Their families is paying a price.
Thank you so much for being here again and for sharing. It really is horrifying. It's the longest government shutdown in American history.
It's the longest government lockout. We have never had a president and a majority leader to lock the employees that serve the American people. And by the way, neither one of them have stopped taking the taxes out of anybody's paycheck. The government has the money. They're just choosing not to pay the workers. It's unconscionable.
Well, and here's hoping that this stops the myth that these problems really are about money. Access to these services is about power. It's about these people keeping working Americans from their rights.
That's exactly right. And these two men are so power hungry that they don't care about the American public. It is time that they do their job, open up the government, then go and negotiate about border security. That's how our system of government works. But you don't hold 800,000 people hostage for your demands.
Thank you so much, sir. And again, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey. Oh, Roger, yeah. What's your name?
So, again, we are in the Hart Atrium in the Senate in Hill Capitol, Washington, D.C. We had a 33-minute moment of silence each minute for a day that the government has been shut down or locked out. I prefer locked out personally. We now have organizers that are going to be heading towards Mitch McConnell's office and try to have a chat with him, despite the fact that the House has passed multiple bills with the attempt to reopen the government. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has considered none of them. The Senate has done nothing. The President has done nothing. And luckily, most of the American public perceives this as what it is, as President Trump holding the country hostage so he can get his pet project passed through. And here we are, waiting for things to change. In the meantime, again, call your representatives, call people who may not represent you, call Mitch McConnell. These people need to know this behavior is not acceptable.
And it only grows and becomes, marginally, each day it becomes marginally worse.
First jobs in town.
Yeah. And I've
so thanks for being with us. Are we doing media? Would you mind holding this for me? Sure.
What's wrong with America? This is a live familiar. I think I've met you before. He kept saying,
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
So, we're with ACT.tv. Do you want to tell our viewers what we're doing here? Maybe introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Edward Hill. I'm a furloughed federal employee, and we're here to protest and to bring light to this story and to encourage our congressmen, our senators, the president to end the government shutdown so we can return back to work, do our jobs, and serve the American public.
Yeah, I appreciate that. How long? So have you been shut down for 33 days?
Yeah, I believe since December 22nd.
Okay. So what can people do to support you right now?
Thank you for asking that. You know, I received a lot of support from friends and family asking me how can they help. But the number one way that everyone that's listening to this can help is to call their senators, call their congressmen, and say this is ridiculous to shut down the federal government, end the shutdown now. And it has such a residual effect. Not only does it affect me as a federal employee and it affect the contractors not working, but every single entity that I do business with is affecting this. I went out to lunch and had a luncheon meeting yesterday. The young lady told me at the restaurant that they reduced her hours, they sent her home early, they're not hiring the wait staff because people are not spending money. We don't know the next time that we're going to get a paycheck. So we have to be careful every single dollar that we spend. Even coming to events like this, I don't know when I'm going to be able to fill up my gas again, because once the money in my checking account is gone, or our money is gone. So we were told that we're going to get paid again, but who knows how long? We didn't know it was going to be a month.
I'm really sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
It really is unconscionable because you're in a state of stress. You can't get a second job. You don't know when this is going to be over.
But it's more than a news story. It's more than me talking to you. You're talking to me. It's at home every night wondering when am I going to be able to pay my bills. I've talked to my creditors. Some are willing to work with me. Others are like, I'm sorry, but we need our money. And that's stressful, especially when you work very hard. You went to school to get a good job with the government, which is something that used to be very honorable. And now it's like almost a joke to work for the federal government. There used to be stability and honor in working for the government. Now, I want to go private industry, but I have 22 years invested in my career. So it's really difficult.
I'm really sorry. And look, in an ideal situation, creditors, landlords would be sympathetic, but they're not. Of course they're not, even though this problem has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, but it affects everybody. It has nothing to do with me personally, but it affects us all. Like I said, it not only affects me as a federal employee, but it affects the people that I serve. So that's the real tragedy. It affects everybody. It's a residual effect. So I just really want our congressmen, I want our president to stop fighting to end the shutdown now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Do you guys have a card? Do you guys have a card?
There was another wheel. I know that. I know that wheel. Wheel 1.0. I'm wheel 2.0.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited for the bill. I think that
You're walking, talking,
So, again, we are here in Hart, and I'm here with my friend Rio. Rio, do you want to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Rio Taswell. I work with People for the American Way, and then generally just part of the broader progressive movement.
That's a good thing to do, in my very biased opinion.
I feel good about it. I get to work with lovely people like the team at act.tv on a regular basis.
It's really good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Yeah.
So, what can you tell people about how to process all this information that's coming about the shutdown and what to do, how to be active and organized around it?
So I think first and foremost, the main thing that people can and should do is call their senator and tell them that they want a funding bill to be brought to the Senate floor and voted on, because the reality is that Mitch McConnell has the ability to whip the votes and get a funding bill passed and actually override a presidential veto. They could do this tomorrow. They, in fact, had the votes last month. The Senate voted unanimously on a package that actually would have given Trump some funding for his racist border wall, but he decided to veto it or to not sign it because of right-wing rhetoric from people like Ann Coulter and Rush Limbaugh, who said that he isn't being hard enough on immigration. So right now, the government is shut down because Trump is afraid of his base, and Mitch McConnell is afraid of Trump and Trump's supporters. So we need Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate to just do the right thing for the American people, for their own freaking constituents, and override a presidential veto and reopen the government, and then talk about immigration.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point. So that initially Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were willing to give the president $1 billion for border security, which is what he claimed to want.
That's
so
right.
We've compromised.
And if you go back even further, there was another version of the proposal that gave him $25 billion for border security in exchange for DACA, to give children that were brought here as young infants and whatnot from other countries the ability to become citizens. It was a DACA agreement, it was an exchange, and Trump passed on that. That was by far the best possible deal he was ever going to get. And here we are now, where there's been a shift in power. Obviously, the Democrats have control in the House, and the House controls spending. All spending bills originate in the House. So the landscape has changed significantly. So Trump's trying to get more when he has less leverage, and it's just not going to work. And the Democrats are doing the right thing and standing firm on this. So it's really Trump that's holding this up, and McConnell also could really end this today, but this is all about Trump and his obsession with a racist monument to white supremacy, which is this supposed border wall.
Well, and that is the problem, right? A wall, if we implemented that, would undermine our national security, our ability to be diplomatic in the global sphere in a huge way. It's not just a wall, it's a symbol of white supremacy.
It really is a symbol of white supremacy. They make the argument that it's about border security, about national security, about public health with the addiction epidemic, violence against
I couldn't believe you said that. The OBO, oh my God.
These things all the time as if they're a direct result of there not being a wall on the southern border, but in reality that's just not true at all. Like, there are very real problems around addiction and violence, but they are not tied to illegal immigration, and the illegal immigration that is happening and the drugs that are coming over the border are happening at legal points of entry. So he's really conflating multiple issues and thinking that a border wall would solve these things, when in reality people aren't crossing the desert with drugs or with ill intentions. These criminals that do come into the border, do cross the border in much lower numbers than they're putting out, do so at ports of entry. So they're using a 14th century solution to solve a modern problem, when in reality there are things that the government could be investing in, like drones, like increased personnel, to address these issues. But the real crisis are the people that are fleeing violence, the refugees that are coming up from Central America that are fleeing legitimate crises in their countries and have a constitutional right to come and claim asylum here. And they're saying that those people are actually drug dealers and terrorists, which is just offensive and racist.
Thank you so much for being with us, Rio. Is there anything else you want to add?
I just want to encourage everyone to keep your spirits up. These are obviously dark times, and there's a lot of cynicism, but there is a lot to be optimistic about. The progressive movement is building its power like we have in the House now. 2020 is going to be here before we know it, and by 2021 we could be living in a very different country, so don't give up.
Thank you so much, Rio. I appreciate that. So, thank you so much for being with us today, you guys. As everyone has really been reiterating, please call your representatives, call your senators, call anybody who has any influence with this particular problem. Also, I don't know if this has been outlined, a lot of people are relying on food banks right now, so maybe especially if you live in an area like Washington, D.C. that has been particularly impacted, reach out to the people you know, reach out to the food banks that are helping, the organizations that are helping, because this is a huge problem and it is impacting us in a large national way. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys later.
Otherwise,